Assalamu alaikum, সম্মানিত দর্শক. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of Community Issues, your fortnightly favorite program. As usual, we are here with your requested program, and this evening we have the pleasure of having the Executive Mayor of London Borough of Tower Hamlets, Mr. John Biggs, who's been in power for the last 10 months or so. We're going to find out from him what he's been doing since he's been in power, how London Borough of Tower Hamlet is running, and from the second segment onward you will be able to take questions, put questions to him, and the Executive Mayor will answer you directly. So please stay with us, don't go anywhere else. In the first segment there will be a series of questions, then on the second segment you can ask him any questions that you want, and the same on the third segment. So Mr. John Biggs, may I formally welcome you to ATN Bangla UK. Thank you for giving your valuable time. I know you've worked extremely hard and have had a long day, and after a long day's work you've decided to come in and give us this interview, so we're very grateful to you.
Well, I'm delighted to be here, and assalamu alaikum to all viewers, and it's good to be back at ATN Bangla.
Thank you very much.
Good community station. Well, yeah, it's a big business, but it's got its feet in the community.
Absolutely. ATN Bangla UK is working for the community, and we wouldn't have got to where we are without the support of our local politicians, and you are one of them. Mr. Biggs, my first question to you is, obviously we've got the London mayoral election coming up, which is just around the corner. What is the implication of the London mayoral election for Tower Hamlets?
Well, it's pretty big. I mean, obviously, you would be surprised if I didn't support Sadiq Khan, because he's the Labour candidate, and so obviously I'm hoping it's a democracy. People need to vote for who they want to, but I want people in the East End to come out and support my candidate. And it will make a big difference for Tower Hamlets, because we have a Conservative government who are doing a lot of things, particularly in terms of housing, in terms of the benefit changes, in terms of their investment priorities, in terms of the way the East End is changing, which in my view are not very helpful for our communities, including the Bangladeshi community in the East End. And we need to have a change of direction. And if my candidate wins, then I think he won't control the government, but he will start pushing London in another direction in terms of more affordable housing, in terms of making sure that we try to prioritise our resources as a city for people who need support from us. Because, you know, the Conservatives are not all wicked. I've always been balanced in my views about these things. They're not all wicked, but their priorities are more about helping their friends, I guess, and we need to make sure that we focus on what's important for us in the East End.
Okay. What is the impact of and council response to housing and planning bill?
The housing and planning bill, which is currently being discussed in Parliament, if it goes through as they plan, will be pretty disastrous for us in East London. It will require us to sell empty council properties, or some of them. It will require it will mean a loss of investment.
Isn't that a good thing for people to be able to buy a council home?
Well, that's a good.
Giving them the stepping stone to get into the housing ladder?
Okay, well, they've introduced the right to buy for. See, I don't have a problem with the right to buy, but I think there should also be a right to rent. So I think people who have an opportunity to buy their home, that's great, no problem with that. But people should also, many people on the waiting list are waiting for somewhere to rent, and they're just not being built. And every time you sell one of these places, it's one fewer for people on the waiting list. So
you say this, I mean, what is the current waiting list in Tower Hamlets?
Current waiting list is about 20,000 people. We have roughly 2,000 families in homeless accommodation, temporary accommodation. And it means that people have to wait many, many years before they get a property that they can call their own.
The government, how many years?
Well, it depends on what you're waiting for. So if you're waiting for a 1 or a 2 bedroom, maybe 6-7 years. If you're waiting for a 4 bedroom, maybe 8, 9, 10 years. There are people come to see me who've been waiting longer than that because they have particular needs, you know, a disability or something. And it's terrible. For each individual family, you can have a family where your kids are born, they grow up, they leave home, and you're overcrowded throughout that whole period. And I don't think that's how we should live as a country. So my priority is that we need to invest more in housing.
You said that we need to invest more in housing, and we've seen over the years that although the council don't build homes anymore, it is built by social landlords.
Well, we do build homes. In fact, I've introduced a policy which says that we're going to build at least 1,000 council houses in the next few years. They won't all be done by the next election in 2 years' time, because I've only been in a short time. But we will know where they're going to be. We've already got up to about 860 identified places where we're going to build council houses. And so within about 5 years, we should have built 1,000 council houses. So we are building council houses, but you're quite right. A lot of it's built by social landlords who aren't the council, and they have to go to the banks and borrow money, and their rents can quite often be higher.
Absolutely.
And that can be quite crippling for families as well. Mm-hmm. So one of the wicked things, in my opinion, that the Conservative government have done is they have taken the word affordable, and they've taken it to mean places which aren't affordable as well.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but in terms of the rental differences between the private sector and the so-called affordable, it's not much difference nowadays, is it?
Well, what we're doing as a council, one of my priorities when I was elected was to create what we call an affordable housing commission, and we were looking at the cost of housing in East London and trying to find ways of keeping those rents down. So we are setting lower rent standards because we want people to be able to afford to live in the East End. And we're pushing a hard bargain with the developers to make sure that we get lower rent standards. The big problem in East London is that we're a victim of success, if you like. Everyone wants to live here, so the prices have gone up and up and up, and it means that people at the bottom just can't get in.
Of course, the other problems that we have seen over the years is that the so-called social landlords that are building homes in Tower Hamlets are not necessarily for people that are waiting on the council housing list, but are more for private sector, and we're getting foreign investors coming in the borough, buying these homes at a very high price, and are either often kept empty or are rented out. And in terms of their allocation to people that are on the council waiting list or their own waiting list, is somewhat very low.
Well, I mean, it's a long, long time ago, but in the period after the Second World War, we built millions of council houses in this country. We needed to rebuild the country after the war, and we provided decent homes, and the government paid for those to be built. The way the housing providers are meant to do it nowadays is go to the banks, do a deal with the developer, and so they build 100 houses and 60 or 70 of them have to be sold, and only the other 30 are for rent.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's just not enough in terms of what we need.
Sure.
So what we need is a government that's prepared to invest in housing, and it would make sense. It would help the building industry, it would help people in need, it would help people to bring up families in decent housing. The rents might be a bit higher than council rents have been in the past, but they would still be affordable for people.
So will that be the case if...
if Sadiq becomes mayor, he will have to work with he will be the mayor of London. He'll have quite a lot of power, but he will need to depend on the national government to give him support as well. And I think while the Conservatives are in Downing Street, he's not going to get the sort of support that we really need to have. We need to... This is a serious problem in London. It's not just about individual families, it's also about how London works. So if you want people to work in all sorts of jobs in London, they need to be able to afford to live here. And if London becomes a place that only wealthy people can live in, then that's not going to be sustainable. I mean, it hasn't reached that point yet, but you're already finding that employers in central London are having trouble finding people who can afford to work with them because the travel costs are too high, they can't afford to live in London. And that's a big problem. And it's massive other impacts as well.
Sure. I mean, having said that, we also have, as well as extended families, families with disabilities, but a lot of our young people are on the housing waiting register.
Right. Now, see, the problem there is, so sorry I interrupted you, but the problem is, if you're a young person on the register and you don't have any kids of your own, you will be on the register, but you won't have enough priority to get a home. So we're finding many people are just being forced out of East London and to outer London, where the house prices are lower, and they can rent somewhere out there, and then once they've gone, they can never come back.
Sure.
So it's changing the way the city works. Now, if you believe in the market, then you can say, what's the big deal? The market works and it makes everyone richer in the end, so why worry?
Sure.
But I quite believe in community as well. And I know that the Bangladeshi community believes in community. It's family, and sticking close to the people who are part of your family is a pretty important part of life.
Sure.
And we can't have everything in this world, but I think supporting each other, supporting families, supporting our elders when they get older and need looking after are pretty important things.
Sure.
It's not all about money.
And therefore it is important for us to keep our young people in the borough.
I think if we can, yeah.
Sure.
And so that's a priority, and at present it's going to be very hard to meet that. Whoever the mayor is will have trouble doing that, but we got it as a priority that we want to try and do what we can. There's other stuff we can do as well, so we need to try and help people get into jobs as well. So if people can get a job, then obviously they can help balance their budgets and meet their housing costs and look after their families. And so we want to tackle some of those problems as well.
Sure. I mean, you say that the people in the city can't get enough people to work, but we have evidence in Tower Hamlets that a lot of our graduates, a lot of our young people cannot access to those jobs that exist on our doorsteps.
Yep.
What is your council doing to ensure that our people do find the right job?
Yep. Well, it's a two-sided problem. On the one hand, there are people in central London jobs who are looking for fairly low-paid employees, I guess, at the living wage, and they're having trouble getting people who live close enough to make it worth their while. On the other hand, we have young people in our borough who've worked very hard, who've studied, who've got a degree, who are looking for a job and they can't get one. And clearly there's something wrong there. So what I've done is I've appointed a cabinet member whose job is particularly to look for jobs and employment. And that's Joshua Peck, and he's working on it as we speak. We're looking at how we can use the council budgets to work with employers and get training, get people to greater help with interview techniques and CVs. We also need to talk to employers, because if employers have got a glass wall that stops people coming in their door,
absolutely,
then we need to challenge that. I mean, I think the evidence of history is that a lot of employers quite like employing people who look like them or are related to family members who work with them. Great strength of London is that we're a diverse city, and
absolutely,
people are missing a chance if they don't have a diverse workforce as well. So and on top of that, say you've got an employee who lives in East London, 10, 20 minutes walk from your work, then you'd be pretty stupid not to employ them if you could, if they were up to it, because they wouldn't be held up by the transport system. They would be less stressed when they got to work. It's a win-win-win. We should work on that.
We also have a lot of key workers that lives in the borough.
Yeah.
And cannot get onto the housing ladder because of the kind of wage that they're earning.
Yeah.
What are we doing to help them?
That's another tricky one, because the way the housing market works in the East End, we're now in a position where we have quite a lot of people on lower incomes who maybe get a council house if they wait long enough, and we have quite a lot of people on high incomes who can afford the expensive places, the private sector, and not a lot in between. So the commission I've appointed is coming back with its report very soon, and we're looking at providing more houses at council type rents, but also some properties for key workers. So they don't have to be special key workers, but they're people who are never going to get the priority for a council property but cannot afford to live in the borough. And we won't be able to solve everyone's problem, but we could build.
Well, at least we're heading in the right direction.
Yeah. That's what we want to do.
Thank you for that, John. My next question to you is, what is the progress of the youth services review? Because I understand the youth services in Tower Hamlets is in a bit of a mess, to put it bluntly. Okay,
so the youth service that I inherited from the previous mayor has been a bit of a mess. There have been investigations going on for a long time. It's not just about what happened when he was the mayor. So I'll just be clear about that. I'm not here to play slapstick politics,
No, absolutely not.
So there's been a problem going on for some years now, and we've finished the investigations and the review, and we are now looking at how we procure our youth service. So we want to use the people we've got, the good people we've got, and we want to make the service work better. We found some of our youth centres are not working as effectively as they could do, so we've got places that are meant to be open which have very few young people in them. We've got other young people who find that there's not a youth centre they feel they can use. So we need to redesign the service so it reaches out to young people. We need to use the massive amount of experience of existing youth workers in the borough. There's a lot of people who have learnt their skills in the youth service, and we need to use that talent. But the youth service got a bit stuck, I think, it's fair to say.
So when are you hoping to resolve it by?
Well, it's now been transferred over from one part of the council to children's services, which is where it's going to belong in the future. Yeah. We have a consultant in the council who's worked up a new strategy, which we're talking about in the next few weeks. We need to make sure we balance our budget effectively as well. So I think by the summer we'll have a policy we want to consult with people on, and by the autumn we'll start filling it up with people. So there's still a youth service. There's still lots of youth workers and youth services provided. We just need to make it work more efficiently and more effectively.
And of course, Tower Hamlet has the highest youth population in comparison with the rest of London, it's absolutely important that...
Absolutely, and we still have one of the highest funded youth services in the country. I think there's one or two places who've got a slightly big one. Hackney has a slightly bigger youth service than ours in terms of its funding. But after Hackney, Tower Hamlets is pretty high up, and most other London councils are maybe half or slightly more than half the size of ours. So we have quite a generously funded youth service, and we want to try and keep it that way.
Thank you. You've mentioned the budget. And I'm going to ask you a little bit about that. I mean, what impact can the residents expect on services as a result of your recent budget?
Well, okay, so the good news is that this year, although the opposition have argued this is not the case, this year the budget savings have been relatively painless. Now, you can never have budget savings without causing some problems somewhere, but we've achieved savings on the budget this year by...
John, can I just stop you for a moment, because we need to go on a short break.
Okay.
After the break, we will continue with that question.
Sure, okay? No worries.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching us. We are going on a short break. We'll be back very soon. Please don't go anywhere. And from the second segment, as I said, we will be taking questions. So if you have any questions that you want to put to John, you can phone in and put it. Thank you. We'll see you soon.
They're ugly. Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for staying with us. On the other end, if you have just joined us, a very big welcome. As you know, our topic today is London Borough of Tower Hamlets, and we have the Executive Mayor, Mr. John Biggs, who's going to talk about Tower Hamlet Council and what he's been doing over the last 10 months since he's taken over as the Executive Mayor. Just before we went on break, I asked him a question on resident expectation as a result of the recent budget.
Yep.
And Johnny was saying...
Okay, I was saying that this year's budget cuts were painful, but they didn't massively affect people out there in the community. Next year is going to be a bit tougher, so we're starting already. We're looking at how we can achieve twice as many savings. We have no choice about this, by the way. We can put up the council tax if we want to by a little bit, but we don't like doing that. But we need to find £30 million. We can put up the council tax and raise £1.5 million, but nevertheless we still need to find £30 million. So,
and how are you going to do that?
Well, I'm tempted to say, don't ask me, but you do have to ask me because I'm the mayor.
Of course, yeah.
And so we're looking across the way the council works. We need to reorganise bits of the way the council works, look at the way it buys services from other people, look at some of the budgets and see whether we can make them work more efficiently. I'm not going to pretend it won't be painful, and it will be painful. But we need to protect people, particularly needy people out there in the borough.
Absolutely. And
we need to make sure that the stuff works. So the streets are clean, the street lighting works, the libraries are still working.
So are you proposing that you will protect the frontline services, but look on the top level of heavy management?
Okay. Maybe? Well, I think you see, people always say that. I don't like giving lazy answers. So yes, of course we'll do that. We need to protect the front line. If you mean by that we need to protect vulnerable people who need services, whether it's social care or the education service or the street cleaning service. But if you think about it, that doesn't mean that all the other council officers are just layabouts who shouldn't be there, because that's not true. I mean, everyone who's doing a job out in the front line needs people behind them to support them. Yeah. So we need to be very clever about the way we do stuff. So we might use IT better. As an example, if you can do your housing benefit or your parking permit or something else on the internet, a lot of people nowadays have telephones and you can do it on the internet, then that's about a third the cost to us as taxpayers as if you do it by turning up at an office and speaking to someone.
Sure.
So, there are ways we can save money by doing that.
Yeah.
And we do need to look at the painless ways of saving stuff.
But it's also true to say that within the council itself, and I'm sure it exists in other organisations as well, there are far too many tiers of management. Yep. And do we really need to have all of them? That's the question I'm asking. Yeah, well, we need a council that's well run. But yes, if there are too many tiers of management, then we need to invite people to go off, and the council's done that for many years now. But we need to do it in a way that's respectful and not painful for staff if we can. But our main duty is to protect people in the community who need our services. So yeah. Sure. You've mentioned savings, and obviously £30 million is a lot of money.
Yep.
And I can see that since you've been elected as the mayor, you have decided to get rid of the chauffeur-driven car that the previous executive mayor used to have. Mm-hmm. How much of a saving have you made in that?
Well, I was very clear that we didn't need to have a big bloated mayor's office. So we got rid of the car, and the driver was redeployed, and we saved about £30,000 a year on that. We also made a saving of £300,000 in consultancy budgets, because the previous mayor had lots of people who would pop in and do a bit of work from time to time.
So you got rid of the consultants?
So we got rid of the consultants as well.
You got rid of the chauffeur-driven car?
Yeah. So we've saved...
What about East End Life? Have you still
East
got
End
that?
Life, East End Life is going to go. The last edition is about the 17th of May. And it has to go because the government is forcing us to make it go.
Okay.
It also has to go because the world has changed. If you ask me genuinely, would I like to keep it? I think the lazy answer is it'd be nice to keep it. Although when we
So
look at
what happened to all the people that used to work with East End
okay,
Life?
well, when you look at East End Life, it's very popular with some people. So older people quite like it, and certain bits of the community quite like it, but a lot of other people just ignore it. So how do we reach people in the community using the internet, using emails, using Twitter, using leaflets, using the libraries and idea stores?
And how does the cost compare?
Well, we haven't worked that out yet. There's a problem, which is that East End Life paid for itself by covering all its own, by taking all the advertising. So the council didn't have to buy advertising in outside newspapers. When East End Life goes, we'll have to buy advertising in outside newspapers. But I'm hoping it will be roughly the same price as before. Maybe it'll be a slight saving as well. But we do need to get information to people. We need to remind ourselves that people need to understand how the council works and how they can access the services. So if your kid is about to go to school, you need to know how to apply for a school place. If you want to use the leisure services, you need to know where they are. Sure. If you want to apply for a job in the council, then you need to be able to find it on the internet or through other means.
Sure. So it's for information purposes, really.
Yeah,
to find other venues. Okay, John. Look, I'm not trying to cut you short, but I think in terms of time, we need to manage it effectively. You've mentioned the refuse collection service as part of your response to the cost-saving exercise, but Tower Hamlet Council has been under some criticism over the way in which the refuse collection had been handled over the past few months. Okay. Why was that?
Okay, so when I was elected, there was a real problem with the waste service, in my opinion. There was a lot of dumping and waste on the streets, and the service wasn't working very effectively. I started having weekly meetings with officers, and we also found some money. We first of all put £200,000 back into the service, then we put another £500,000 back in to employ extra street sweepers and more enforcement staff.
So are the streets more cleaner now? Or?
Okay, and the answer is that the streets are cleaner by and large, but there is a problem in the borough with dumping. There's a problem with dumping by residents and by businesses and by people dropping litter in the streets. And so we need to clean up the streets better, but we also need to change people's behaviour. And we need to get the message to people that we spend millions of pounds every year sweeping up the streets.
So what are you doing to enforce legislation to stop people dumping?
And the bad news and the good news is that the previous mayor didn't want us to issue enforcement notices, and I'm quite keen for us to do that. I think we need to penalise people. We need to change people's behaviour. We need to have education, particularly good with young people. We need to educate people that it's a waste of their money to have to employ people to clear up stuff that they have dumped on the ground. We need to get to young people in the schools to educate them, to educate their parents to behave better. But we also need to give penalty notices to people. If we find people dropping stuff, then we need to start fining them for it. And I make no apology for that, because in the end it's costing us all lots of money in the borough to clear up the mess that people leave behind.
Sure.
I'm not thinking of someone walking down the street and dropping a sweet wrapper or a cigarette end, although even technically that's a mistake. But there are businesses who they come out their office and they look around to check there's no one looking, and then they dump their stuff in the street.
So those are the culprits that you're targeting.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, John. What are the main challenges facing the borough between now and 2018?
Well, the biggest challenge is about our budget and balancing the budget. But in terms of so that's the sort of engine of the council. In terms of what we do as a council, the biggest challenges are about housing, about trying to provide more affordable housing, about supporting our schools and making sure that kids coming out of our schools, young people coming out of schools, have a chance for decent jobs and a good further education. It's about employment. That's a big priority for us, making sure that people have better access to training and support to get them into work, whether they're young or whether they may be slightly older, like you or me. There are people who lose their jobs.
I'm not old, John.
Okay, you're just.
I'm still young.
You're still young. I'm still young I'm still a teenager in my heart, of course. But people who lose a job mid-career for whatever reason, we need to help them to retrain and get into work as well. And it's not easy, and we don't have limitless money, but we can do better than we're doing as well. Yeah. And we need to make sure that people have a strong sense of the quality of life.
Can I ask you another question, John? I mean, you said that people who are in midlife crisis are trying to get back into jobs, and you're trying to provide training for them. But we have services in the borough, such as the skills match and some of the other services, who are there to help and support those people. Has any monitoring been done to see how much of a work they're doing to help people?
Well, I'm very pleased you said that, because this very day we had a private cabinet meeting and we received a report about the training projects in the borough, and they're okay, but they could be better. So we're looking at ways of improving our training access for people. I thought you were going to say that a lot of those projects focus on younger people, and let's be honest. Most of the resources will tend to be on younger people, but we need to give people a second chance as well if we can, and I think that's really important. And there are two reasons for that. One is because it's about people's dignity,
Sure.
but the other one is because it's about the cost of living. You get your self-respect by working, and you get the opportunity to survive in East London as well.
Sure.
Because London is not a charity for people. People need to have money in their pockets to survive. And with the benefit cuts coming in, it's going to make it a lot harder for people to stay around here. So I'm very aware of that some of the neediest people need us to help them to help themselves,
Sure.
as well as us helping them as much as we can out in any event.
Good. Yeah. Thanks for that. What do you want Tower Hamlets Council to be known for the next 5 years?
Well, okay. I mean, we talk about all sorts of stuff, but one of the first things, I want us to no longer be known for the controversy that we had in the last couple of years. So we did have some bad headlines, and we were over the national newspapers for bad things. I want us to be seen for two things. One is that we are providing really excellent services and doing a good job for people. But the other is about us being a community where people enjoy living and they work together effectively, where we're respectful, where we tackle discrimination and racism, where people can feel that they have a chance, whoever they are and where they come from. Because the East End of London has always sort of done that. It's been historically an entry point where people come here from.
Yes, people from all over the world.
From all over the world, or even my ancestors came from the English countryside, and they came to London, and they made, you get a chance to make something of your life, and we need to help that to continue to happen.
Sure. So you are committed to make sure that does happen.
But one of the great things about Tower Hamlets, you see, there are a younger generation, people of our generation. I shouldn't focus, but on age so much, but younger generation take it for granted that London is a very diverse city, and they like it. I like the diversity of London.
Good.
And it's a real strength for our city.
Well, we will talk about diversity and how we're going to celebrate diversity in a minute.
Okay.
My next question to you is Tower Hamlets as a borough have over the last few years have always been in the headline of newspapers for being corrupt, for doing the wrong sort of things, and since you've taken over, as a result of that, the government decided to put in 3 commissioners.
Yep.
And they're still there. My question to you is, do we still need those commissioners? How much is it costing to have those commissioners? Who's paying for it? Is it coming out of the taxpayers' budget? How long are they likely to be in there? And what are you doing to ensure that Tower Hamlets gets a squeaky clean image as it should?
Well, we did a calculation the other day, and we reckon that all of the investigations, including the audit reports and so on, and the legal actions, have cost British people over £2 million investigating Tower Hamlets over the last few years. So that's an awful lot of money. How much the commissioners cost? At the moment, they cost about, there are 4 of them, and they cost £2,600 a week if they all do 1 day a week. So there's one on £800 a day and 3 on £600 a day. Nice work if you can get it, and they have office support as well. So if you multiply that by 50 times, then that's £150,000 a year with the support they're getting. So that's a lot of money. And do we want them to stay? No, we want them to go. I'm very clear I want them to go. They came here for a reason, and we need to persuade them that that reason has come to an end. So they're like...
Well, have you not managed to do that over the last 10 months?
Well, we've made quite a lot of progress. I think they would say that the place was in a bigger mess than I thought, and I think they're probably right. We have some serious management problems in the way the council works. We've got very good staff, but some of the bits of the council are not working very effectively. We need to sort out our grants, because the grants system was used badly by the previous regime.
Are we talking about mainstream grants?
We're talking about mainstream grants and grants in general, but you see, again, it's not just about the previous mayor, but it was exemplified by the previous mayor that grants were used they were allocated without proper accountability, and if you take that too far, that's basically corrupt. So we needed to be transparent and treat everyone fairly.
Okay, you talk about treating everyone fairly, you talk about being transparent with the grant allocation.
Yep.
My next question to you is that why is it that the mainstream funding for the ethnic minority projects, such as the mother tongue projects, have disappeared completely?
Well,
and will they be replaced by something else?
That's not quite true if you take mother tongue. If you take the Community Language Service, which the council supports, that spends about £750,000 a year on providing support for mother tongue teaching for young people. So it still exists as a service. Some of the individual projects were cut, and what happened there was that the commissioners came and they took over our grant decisions, and so I'm not allowed to make a single grant decision. They're all made by the commissioners.
Yeah, but it seems
and
like
so, and when they evaluated,
we talk about equality, we talk about fair
Yeah.
allocation, but it seems like that the commissioners have taken a decision to cut more or less all the ethnic minority projects.
Okay. It's not my job to defend the commissioners, but they haven't done that. What they did do, though, they had about 250 grant applications, and they reduced it to about 130 grants. And so about half the people who bid for grants didn't get them. A lot of the small organisations didn't get them. The commissioners would say they did it fairly on geography, but it meant a lot of, and on representative groups as well. So they made sure that the Somali groups got funding, Bengali groups got funding. But clearly what happened was a lot of the small projects folded as a result of that.
Can I also ask you another question? I mean, in terms of, we're not supposed to be mentioning an individual project, but there is a large organisation within Tower Hamlets whose funding was stopped by the previous mayor. And then when you got elected in, large sums of money was allocated to that organisation.
Okay.
And people are questioning, why is it?
So you're talking about, shall I name it?
Well, it's entirely up to you. I'm not going to name it.
So you're talking about the Rich Mix Centre in Bethnal Green. And the answer there is I'm not a great fan of the Rich Mix Centre, but the Rich Mix Centre was given money through a planning decision several years ago, and the previous mayor, for reasons you'd have to ask him about, blocked that money. Now, the way that money was allocated, it couldn't be spent on anything else. It had to be spent on the Rich Mix Centre, so it was just frozen, sitting in a bank account, doing nothing. When I became mayor, I said, this is ridiculous.
And have they been assessed for value for money?
Yeah. Well, it's not quite like that. We have to look at their accounts and their accountability and their outputs, and
are they serving the local community?
And we went through a very long process, at the end of which we concluded that they could demonstrate that they were doing a reasonable job. We got them to change some of their priorities as well, and we released the money, because the alternative to that was that the previous mayor was trying to bankrupt them, basically. And what would have happened then would be that the centre would have closed down, the banks would have moved in, we'd have ended up with an empty building which didn't belong to anyone useful, and the services it provides wouldn't be provided. What I'm very clear about as mayor is that they're an independent organisation, but they do need to do more outreach into the community in Tower Hamlets.
And they need to ensure that the community as a whole gets its fair share.
And so another thing that I'm doing is, and on the 4th of May this will happen, is we're reopening the Kobi Nazrul Centre.
Good, I'm going to ask you about that.
Just in Hanbury Street, which has been shut for some time now.
Yes.
I know that there have been disputes about the way it operates, and so there's a risk that people will disagree about what should happen there, but I want us to get a move on and sponsor South Asian arts in the borough through the Kobi Nazrul Centre and through the Rich Mix Centre and through other cultural organisations.
So where will the funding come for the Kobi Nazrul Centre?
That's already available in the arts and culture programmes of the council.
Okay, and who's going to manage it? Have you set up the board to manage it?
Okay, it'll be managed by the council, and there will be a board that will guide it, which will be based in the community.
Okay.
And I guarantee that whoever's on that board, there'll be some people who won't be happy, but this is the East End. People always argue about stuff.
No, of course.
But what I want it to do is provide good quality arts.
The important
programs.
thing, as I understand, John, the important thing is the Kobi Nazrul Centre is a community hub.
Yep.
And it should be used by the community.
Yeah.
And any board that you put up has to be representatives from that community, people with experience, and can actually make a valuable contribution.
And absolutely. So that's the vital thing. So it's a building, it belongs to the council. We're going to fund, we're going to give them a budget which will help them to employ 1 or 2 people initially. That's what the budget does, and the running costs. And then they need to build a programme of activity. They need to think about sponsorship, about other ways they can raise funding. And they need to make sure that they're properly accountable for what they're doing. And if it doesn't work, then we'll have to replace people on that board and make sure it is properly accountable. But I'm confident at the moment that it will be. I don't want to have anything directly to do with it, because I don't know much about South Asian arts, and I think people who are experts in the community need to do that. And I look forward to it happening, both being a mixture of traditional stuff and forward-looking stuff.
So you said it's opening on the 4th of May?
Yeah, 4th of May, which happens to be Al Tabari Day.
So the board has already been set up, then I take it?
The board,
people have been appointed.
Okay, you need to speak to my cabinet member, and we have got a short list of names, and I think that board has been agreed with.
Well, the last time I spoke with the cabinet member on this issue, I was told that the cabinet member didn't want you to make that decision, and she has passed on that decision to yourselves.
Well, I think we've sorted it now.
Well,
And so watch this space. It's
Okay.
going to open on the 4th of May,
right.
and it will have a board who will help to direct its activities. And I'm hopeful that it will work effectively in partnership with the council and with other organisations, and it will give
And the community at large, of
and
course.
it will give a sense of pride and ownership
Well-
to the community. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that can be done there.
Absolutely,
And
absolutely.
it's not just about Kobe Nazrul, it's about making sure that cultural activity in the East End of London belongs to all people in the East End of London.
Absolutely.
So, it's
It's
not...
a multicultural community, it's a
Absolutely,
diverse
yeah.
community, and
Yeah.
we should be in a position to be able to
Yeah,
celebrate.
you see it, and the point I was making
diversity.
earlier about
Yeah.
diversity, it's not about me, ticking the box that says I'm interested in diversity. It's also about the fact that when we ask people what they like about East London, people from all communities, most people, particularly younger people, and particularly people who choose to live here, people who are moving in, they like the diversity, they like the buzz of the place, the
Good.
excitement of Tower Hamlets.
And of course, Tower Hamlets has
And-
always been
Yeah.
well known for
Well,
that.
it's always been exciting, and sometimes we have, disagreements about stuff, but it's been an exciting place which is very creative, and people like that.
Good. I'm glad you mentioned this, because my next question is precisely about celebrating diversity, and
Okay.
very nicely led on to the Boishakhi Mela.
Yep.
What is the position with the Boishakhi Mela? I understand that the previous committee that used to run it are no longer going to be doing it. It will be the council that will run it.
Mm-hmm.
When will it happen? How much is it costing us? Is it moving back to Weaversfield? Will the local businesses of Brick Lane and the surrounding area benefit from it as they used to?
Well, how long have you got? So I'll give you the 2-minute answer, which is that the previous organisers of the Boishakhi Mela Trust, were unable to sign the contract. This was essentially because there were some audit requirements set by the commissioners. I mentioned the commissioners already, and they said they weren't prepared to support the event without the audit conditions being met. So you need to speak to them about that. And it meant that the event, which was going to take place in May, is now going to have to be organised by the council, will take place in July. It's going to take place in Weavers Fields, open space. I'm really very well aware that there are some people in the community who feel very unhappy about that, and that there may be antisocial behaviour issues, and so we'll watch it closely. And if it doesn't work, we'll take it back to Victoria Park. But when I was elected, I said I understood there was a lot of pressure to move back to Weavers Fields. I know this is a very contentious issue, but I want us to try it there. I want us to manage it effectively. I want us to have officers on duty to ensure that any risks of antisocial behaviour are minimised.
Sure.
It should also be an opportunity for people to use Brick
But
Lane.
you say this, but in any event
Yeah.
that is of this magnitude,
Yeah,
the Boishakhi Mela is probably the second largest multicultural event after the Notting Hill Gate Carnival.
okay.
And when you have that magnitude of the scale of the Mela itself, you have people coming from all over the country.
Yep.
And, I think in terms of our track record of antisocial behavior and events happening at the Mela has been very low in comparison with some of the other festivals.
How do you mean
that
low?
takes place.
Successful or unsuccessful?
Yeah, successful, I think.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
And, I think
Yeah.
moving it back to Weaversfield, as you've quite rightly said, you said it's a testing period. I don't know why that test is. Maybe you've got some people that are opposing it,
Yeah.
which I hear is the case.
Yeah.
But there are businesses out there that are crying for the Mela.
Yeah. Well, okay.
And the
yeah.
local people, some local
No, I agree
people
with you.
wants it
yeah.
to happen there.
So the starting point is that the Brick Lane area is still emotionally seen by many people in the Bangladeshi community as the heart of the community. And if we can possibly make the Mela take place, because it is essentially a Bangladeshi Mela, a Bengali
Well, that's
Mela,
where it started.
then if we can help it to take place in the heart of the community, then we should make it do that. If it has become too big, and we'll test it this year and see what happens, if it's become too big to happen in Weavers Fields, then we'll have to go back to Victoria Park. But I think I need to be totally practical about that.
Of course.
And we will see what happens, and we will manage it very closely, and yeah, it carries risks. But you're quite right. So
what is the budget for the Boishakhi Mela?
I think you need to look at the decision that I signed, which I think says that I think for commercial reasons I probably can't tell you exactly what it is, but it's not a million miles away from the budget we inherited from the previous organisers.
Right, so it's more or less on the same
Yeah.
same cost.
Although what I'm told, and again, we have a steering group of people who are looking at it, although it is going to be run by the council, and we can't spend the next 2 months arguing about how precisely it's organised.
Okay.
But
John, can I just stop you? We need to go on a short break.
Okay.
After the break, we'll continue.
Okay.
I'll give you a couple of minutes.
Sure.
Ladies and gentlemen, we need to go on a short break. Please don't go anywhere. Stay with us. John will be here. And after the break, you can phone into the program and ask any questions. Thank you for staying with us. Dear viewers, thank you for staying with us. We are back from our short break. On the other hand, if you have joined us, a very big welcome. Our topic today is London Borough of Tower Hamlets, and we have the Executive Mayor of London Borough of Tower Hamlets, Mr. John Biggs, who's been here and has been answering the questions that you put to us. If you have any questions and would like to phone in, our phone number should be displayed on the screen, but please do seek the bill payer's permission before you call, because obviously the cost is quite high. So Mr. Biggs, before we went on breaks, we talked about the Boishakhi Mela, and you were in the process of giving me an answer, and my last question to you was, how much is it costing the borough to do it?
And I think the answer is it's going to cost us roughly what it cost before, which is a manageable sum of money, and we need to manage that cost very carefully. Obviously, we'll make some money by selling some of the stalls, but I'm quite keen that we try to improve the cultural offer at the Mela as well, because it is meant to be a cultural festival.
Absolutely.
Rather than just a fun fair with lots of hot food at it.
Sure.
It'd be nice to have a fun fair with hot food.
So in terms of the stalls, I know you want to raise as much money as possible. One of the complaints that we've had in the past was that the stalls were up for, the prices were too high.
Yeah.
So is the council taking any steps to ensure that the cost is kept to,
Well, we need to do the impossible. We need to make it accessible to people from modest organisations and try to cover as much of the cost of the Mela as we can.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a balancing act.
Sure.
No two ways about it.
But
But I'd like it to be a successful event, obviously, and I'd like the community to feel proud of it.
Sure.
And we will need to manage it very carefully to make sure that it is something that we can be proud of.
So in terms of artists, would you be importing artists from abroad, or would you be using local talents?
I have no idea what decision's been made on that yet. I think obviously there is a cost saving from having local artists, but we need to have something that's attractive to.
So who's going to make that decision then?
Well, we have it's being run from within the council, and the council will be advised by this advisory group that has been appointed or is in the process of being appointed as we speak.
And is that people with relevant experience, or?
Well, it'll be a mixture of people. So the council officers have quite a lot of experience. We've asked the previous organisers to get involved and give us advice as well, but I'm not sure whether they can do that. We've got people in the community who have experience of cultural events and of operating festivals and business events. So we need a mixture of business nous and artistic.
And will that be advertised locally so that people can have an input, or
well,
will it be?
Right, the problem we have is
behind closed doors.
So we're at the end of April now. So May, June, July, we have 3 months, and in that time we can't go through a whole open advert process. What we need to do over the autumn, though, is we need to re-procure, as we say. So we need to put it out for advert, invite people who can run the Mela to bid for doing it, and make sure that we get the right specification for that. So that's a pretty urgent job as well.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Biggs, for providing the answers for the Mela. My next question to you is, Tower Hamlets residents still have a lower life expectancy than other parts of the country. What more should the council be doing on public health?
Okay, so one of the things that the Conservative government did, which is quite helpful in a way, was they gave greater public health responsibility to local councils, and they've given us some money. It was initially about £40 million a year, and now it's a bit less than that, which was money that was being spent on other things locally on the health service anyway. And we decide what to spend that on in terms of public health. We need to look at people's lifestyles. We need to look at getting people off smoking, getting people to drink less alcohol where people drink alcohol, getting people to do more exercise, to eat healthier food, of course, and then we need to target people and some of the issues in the community. For example, big issue with diabetes. Are there things we can do in terms of public health that will make it less likely that people will come down with diabetes in later life?
So what is the council doing in terms of educating people, producing the right type of literature, and because obviously education is very, very important in that field, isn't it?
There's quite a lot of this already.
Yes.
And of course, you go back to one of the good things about East End Life being closed is that we can use a lot more different media to try to get messages across.
Yeah.
I think the problem with East End Life, which I quite like East End Life, was that it meant that we were getting a bit lazy. We said, oh, let's stick it in East End Life, and we don't need to worry about the rest. We need to be a lot smarter about reaching people through the TV, through the radio, through the printed media, and other means about healthy lifestyles. We need to work in partnership with our doctors and GPs, with schools, with educating young people. There's a whole bunch of things. There's a whole bunch. I mean, I used to smoke. I started when I was a teenager, and if I'd known then what I know now, I would never have done it. So getting people off cigarettes is a pretty good thing. Saves money as well.
Yes, absolutely.
And the same with alcohol. I never drank very much myself, but I drink hardly at all now. But these things, they shorten your life.
But at a time when you have a massive cut in your budget, you have to make a £32 million worth of savings or so. How are you going to put more money in or resources in to improve people's lifestyle, to improve people's life expectancy?
The short answer
How are you going to do that?
The short answer is we can't increase the funding in this area, but what we can do is focus on what works and help to improve healthy lifestyles. In the end, whether people have a healthy diet or not is up to them. It's also up to the amount of money they have in their pockets, of course. Yeah. So one of the big determinants of ill health is poverty. So we need to make sure people have access to good advice, but also that we try to improve people's household incomes by getting people into work, by getting their families into work,
and
so people
housing,
can support
of course,
themselves. Yes. Yeah, and obviously housing has an impact as well.
Yeah.
There's been some work in parts of the borough where we've rebuilt a lot of housing, and it shows that it does have some impact, but not always a massive impact. We have big problems of asthma associated with overcrowding, and so if we can reduce overcrowding, we can reduce that. But asthma alone will not shorten most people's lives. There's other stuff we're interested in. So
we have obesity problem as well.
Yeah, we have an obesity problem. Yeah, so people eat the wrong food and too much of it.
Too much of it, and too many fast food in the borough.
Yeah. So chicken and chips is a wonderful business opportunity for people setting up a small business. But we need to try and find healthier ways of doing that. So can you shallow fry it rather than deep frying it? Can you have salad options? There's stuff like that. I mean, I was going to move on to talk about other stuff. So there's an interesting one about air quality. Tower Hamlets, the air quality in Tower Hamlets usually is below the standard required by the European Union. So people who live in Tower Hamlets, including you, including me, including 300,000 people who live here, approaching 300,000 people, we breathe in air that is poisonous, and there's not a lot we can do about it.
But I mean, that's a London-wide problem.
Well, it's a London-wide problem, but it's also about getting people out of their cars, because the biggest cause of air pollution in London is cars and motor vehicles. It's about improving the quality of the environment locally as well. So if you live just down the road from this studio on the Aberfeldy estate in the south of Poplar, by the Blackwall Tunnel, the air quality there is terrible. And if you look at the lives of babies and their lungs, the effect on their lungs, if you look at the quality of life for older people who have respiratory problems, then it's a big problem. It shortens people's lives. People die younger because of the pollution around them. And we need to wake people up to that. It's invisible pollution, but it's still killing them.
But in terms of the council facilities, you've got several sports centres in the borough.
Yeah.
They need to be made more accessible to local people.
Well, if we can,
And especially people that are on poverty line or living just below poverty line, the cost of these those facilities, I think, should be either waived off or be as minimum as possible.
I would like us to introduce a leisure pass. That's proved too difficult in the past, and to offer reduced rates for people on certain benefits. I think that can be in terms of a healthy lifestyle. There have been experiments where your doctor can give you a health prescription, which is about free access to your local swimming pool. When I represented people on the Ocean Estate, there was a program that did that stuff locally in Stepney, and it was very popular. Obviously, these things cost money, but dying young is a pretty serious challenge, and we need to get people healthier lives.
Okay, so we're hoping that over the next course of 5 years or so, that there will be an improvement.
Okay, well, the good news, if you look at life expectancy, it is going up, although it's going up in the East End of London at a reasonable rate, but the West End of London is already a lot higher. And so people are learning to live healthier. and we have improved the quality of life for quite a lot of people down the years. It's not just since I became mayor.
Sure.
But the bad news is we're still some way behind.
Right. Okay. My next question to you then. We've talked about housing earlier on, and we understand the council's responsibility and what the council is doing. But equally, what is the council doing to stand up to poor housing providers in the borough?
Okay. So one of my election pledges was to talk about the behaviour of a number of housing providers. One housing group, Circle, a particular issue. There are other very good landlords, by the way. So until recently, when they made a big mistake, Harker were very, very popular. They made a mistake about parking charges. The East End homes are pretty good.
And what are you doing about those parking
and
charges?
Well, I'm challenging them. I've told them that it's an unreasonable charge. We managed to get the charge for a lot of the tenants reduced from £7 to £4 a week, but that was still more than double what they were paying before. But they're still insisting on charging people whose name is not on the rent book £15 a week, and I think that is ridiculous. I think that's punishing. That's not charging. That's punishing people.
Also the freeholders as well?
The freeholders have
£15 for the freeholders.
Yeah. And I think the problem that the housing providers like Harker have is that they're under a lot of pressure from government policy, which is forcing them to reduce the rents, and they're looking for ways to make income. And we have been negotiating for many months with them about how we can help them on that. And they suddenly put up the parking charges, and we think that was a pretty stupid thing for them.
But can they introduce a two-tier charges? Isn't that discriminatory? Isn't that penalising people for owning their own homes?
I think on parking policy it might be, but it probably isn't. But I think it's not so much that it's discriminatory. I think it's stupid what they're doing. This is a housing provider that's meant to be allowing people to get on with their lives, and if they are making it impossible for people, particularly people on low incomes, but people who need a car for their work, if they're making it impossible for them to park and afford to be able to park, then they are punishing people, and they shouldn't be doing that.
And should housing association not be working in partnership with the local authority, people like yourselves, rather than working in isolation?
So one of the things I want to do as mayor, and we've agreed this week to do this, is to set up a housing committee, so we can call the housing landlords in, talk to them about the service standards they have. Whether we like it or not, the way housing works in this country is changing. So we have fewer, bigger landlords taking over a lot of our housing in the borough, and we need to make sure that they make promises to us that they can keep and that we hold them to it. So I think we're doing the right thing. We need to make sure it happens effectively, and I'm already talking to a lot of the landlords about how we can work together with them. It is a challenge.
Thank you. Thanks for that, John. I think you've answered that quite effectively. Let's move on to. You've talked about the council tax that you could have put it up by a bit more, but you've only put it up by 4%. 4%
is quite a lot, but yeah.
But that still will have an impact on people
that
are
do.
on.
I mean, the good news this year was that my old mate, if I can call him that, Boris Johnson, cut the council tax from City Hall, and that meant that although we put up by 4% locally, the effect on people's bills was less than 4%. It was about half of that. So next year that won't happen, or probably won't happen. So I would be very reluctant to put it up by 4% next year, because it would be a full 4% rather than 2%. So we need to be very careful, because we can't. People are not piggy banks. People are, people have hard-pressed budgets, and we can't milk them. We need to be very efficient the way we run the council.
Sure. My next question to you, you talk about efficiency, and you talk about saving money, and you talk about providing a service to the community at large, where the service is accessible to everyone. We're going to talk about the town hall now.
Okay.
Tower Hamlet Council had a town hall almost right at the edge of the borough, which for some people had been very difficult to access. And it's not a town hall that is owned by the council, it's rented from a private sector. And that costs the taxpayers millions. I know recently you've decided to move to Whitechapel. How much is it going to cost the council to move? And is that a good choice to have a service based centrally?
Well, I inherited the decision to go to Whitechapel from the previous mayor, and I promised that I would take a very detailed look at it and make sure it was the right decision, and it was the right decision. We changed it a bit. And we need to be very careful about the costs. The cost of it will be about £80 million to build a new town hall, which is a lot of money. We can finance that by selling one or two other buildings we have, or 4 or 5 other buildings we have. We also have some reserves which we are earmarking, as they say. So we're keeping those in a special place so that we can spend that to build the new town hall. And the objective is that we build a new town hall using money from sales and from our reserves, and we don't have to borrow money to build it. If we can do that, then we can save local people £6 or £7 or £8 million a year in borrowing costs, and that can be savings off the budget savings that we're otherwise having to make. So it's a complicated thing to do, and it might not work 100%, but my plan is to have a town hall that we own and we don't owe any money on.
Sure.
And that way.
But if you were to move to Whitechapel,
yep,
parking is going to be a major problem.
You're
for
absolutely
you,
right. Now, parking is a nightmare in Whitechapel, and Whitechapel is going to get busier because of Crossrail.
Yes.
On the one hand, it's got very good public transport. On the other hand, it's got a hospital. People have to go to the hospital. You know, they have to travel by car to the hospital if they have an injury, or they're elderly and frail. And so, I want us to look at how we can solve the parking problem there. And there are a couple of answers which we need to explore in a bit more detail. And I can't tell you exactly what they are, but we do need to build some car parking there,
sure,
in my opinion. And that's not very popular. If you talk to the clever people at the town hall, they would say you should never build car parks. Cars are so old-fashioned.
I mean, if you are to build it, where is the likely venue likely to be?
Well, let's wait and see. There's a couple of options.
Okay.
And we'll see what pops up in the next few months.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, Whitechapel as a market is going to be developed, from what we understand.
Yeah. Well, it depends what you mean. It's still a street market, and it should still be a lively, vibrant street market serving the community. One thing that will happen in Whitechapel, and I'm very clear about this, and I think the council in the past has fudged this and has avoided talking about it, is that there's going to be a lot of property development in Whitechapel. The value of land is going to go up and up and up. The price of housing will go up and up and up. And there's a very high risk that people will be squeezed out by that. So what I'm doing with my colleagues is looking at the development, and we can't stop it happening. Most of the land is privately owned.
Sure.
But we need to try and make sure we hang on to as much local benefit for local people.
Good.
And that's not just about housing, it's about affordable workspace where people can set up business. Because, of course, around Whitechapel there's a lot of business people who are predominantly from Asian communities, predominantly Bangladeshi, but not just.
And it's a business that they've built over the years.
And they built up over the years, and the tricky bit is a bit like Brick Lane. The tricky bit is that the business has been built up on the basis of relatively
I'm glad you mentioned Brick Lane, because my next question was going to be about Brick Lane.
Well, okay, Brick Lane and Whitechapel similar.
The current houses in Brick Lane are disappearing.
Yeah.
What are you doing to ensure sustainability?
Well, I can start by finishing the last part of what I was saying, which is both Brick Lane and Whitechapel, if the property gets more expensive, for a business to survive, it needs to improve its profitability. I mean, you don't need to be a genius to see that. So we need to raise the profitability of our locally owned businesses. And that requires people to think smarter about how they can make their businesses work.
Sure.
I've appointed a commission, just a 3-person commission, which is some successful business people and a marketing person. So I think I can announce. So it's Amin Ali and Iqbal Wahab, who owns Roast, and the Cinnamon Club. They're both Bengali businessmen, and a woman who's done marketing work for Canary Wharf, who's not Bengali. And we want them to look at the Brick Lane business community and how that works, and how we can raise the profitability and success of business there.
And how much is that costing us?
That's free.
Right. Okay.
Yep.
So they're giving their services free.
Yep.
Right.
And there are people who want to put something back into the community.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Because I mean, if you're a successful restaurant owner and you look at Brick Lane, there are some good restaurants there, but a lot of people will look at it and worry what the future holds.
Because obviously our local businesses are supporting the local economy.
Yeah.
And they're employing people from the local community.
Absolutely.
So it's important to ensure sustainability. And,
Absolutely. Now, you see, and part of the problem is that in the old days, when Brick Lane buildings didn't cost much money, when they were quite cheap, you could survive on a £10 curry or something. And now the places are worth a couple of £1 million or £1.5 million for one building.
John, we
need a better offer. We're running out of time.
We are almost coming to the end of our program.
I'm just warming up as well. This is bad news.
In terms of the council's achievement, is there anything else that you would like to tell our viewers? What you've done and what you would like to do, and are you likely to stand in election in 2018 again?
Well, okay, I'm very proud of what we've done so far, but we're doing the building blocks. So it's about getting people into work, it's about improving housing, about building new homes. There's lots of other little things we're doing as well about celebrating success in the community and about culture, and I want to focus on that. Do I want to stand again in 2018? Well, from where I'm sitting at the moment, I'd be very happy to be considered to be the candidate again, but let's wait and see, and it's up to the people out there to decide who they want to be their mayor.
Right. Anything else that you want to tell us?
That it's great to be here,
Okay.
and I love being an East Ender, you know.
Sure.
The great thing about East End is that a lot of us weren't born here, but this is our home and we make it work, and it's a great place to be and to mix with people and to get on with our lives and to respect.
Sure. Thank you very much, John. Dear viewers, John Biggs, the Executive Mayor of Tower Hamlets Council, has given us a fairly thorough breakdown of what he's been doing over the last 10 months and have, I think, provided the answers to some of the questions that you put to us. Can we, on behalf of ATN Bangla, thank him for coming along and providing those answers. And no doubt, John, we will be with you. We're working with you closely and for the betterment of our multicultural community. Thank you for the support that you have given us, and we wish you the very best of luck with your career as a politician and, of course, as a friend.
Okay.
And thank you very much for coming along.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure being here, and hopefully people have got a bit more information about what we're doing out of the programme, and I'll be back if you invite me, that is.
Of course, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Shamanito Dashor, dear viewers, we will bring John back again sometime next year, but until then, keep watching ATN Bangla UK, in particular community issues. Thank you for being with us.
I can't wait until next year. Come on now.
Thank you. Thank you very much.